Hello, James. Welcome back to the C1 podcast, where we will be discussing global warming. Is it real?
Hi, Dan. Yes, it's a really important topic to be discussing these days because it's always in the news. Um, Governments are discussing it, businesses are discussing it. It's a very current issue to be addressed, so it's a really important thing. Uh, yes, it is real, at least according to the majority of scientists, anyway. But we'll discuss as we go through in our conversation today.
Yes, and for the record, I also agree that it is very much real. So, the first question of our podcast, James, what is global warming and why is it happening?
So global warming, or I mean, it's often called climate change or sometimes a climate crisis, actually. So global warming refers to the change in our Earth's climate and environment based specifically on human activity. We know for a fact that the Earth's climate and environment changes over time anyway, naturally. But when we talk about global warming, we're talking about human activity. So, for example, that would be emissions of greenhouse gases from industry, from cars, things that human society has created and is having a real impact on our natural world, and often in a bad, negative way. So it changes the climate in a bad way.
I would say that was an accurate description
Yeah,
of what
well,
is
yeah.
happening. Yeah.
Unfortunately, it is, I think. Yeah. So, I mean, like I say, we hear about the climate crisis quite often on the news, and specifically about the effects that it's having on our natural world. So, I mean, could you maybe comment on some of the effects that we're seeing right now?
Oh, well, you don't have to wait too long to see on the news that bushfires in Australia, that's been a real massive issue over there. We've recently had flooding in Germany, which
Oh,
has been
yes.
well, quite catastrophic, really. And of course, there is the melting of the polar ice caps as well, which is in turn causing flooding.
Absolutely. Yeah, you hear about a lot of island countries that are really worried about the rise in sea levels. So places like the Maldives and the Seychelles, this really can have an impact on the life of the country. And I think the big thing that this really draws attention to is how fragile the world is. The climate of the entire world is very carefully in balance. So as soon as human activity starts to change the climate, all kinds of things go wrong, and the complexity is really interfered with. So yeah, it's quite scary, I think, actually, for a lot of people, and I think that's why a lot of people are calling it a crisis. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
But Dan, I don't think it's all entirely bad news. I mean, is there any way we can change it, or is there anything we can do about it? Or
Well, like you said, it's not all bad news. We can start to we can begin to steer the ship in the right direction with
mm,
with lowering carbon emissions, electric cars, cycling instead of driving, uh, taking less flights.
absolutely, yeah. I think that the big one, transport, like you
Mm.
mentioned, is something that we can do as individuals. Sometimes it feels like these big global problems are too difficult to solve as individuals, but I think you're right. Maybe there are certain things we can do. I mean, on a personal level, how would you feel about flying less or driving an electric car, or how would that affect your life?
Well, I don't travel all that much, and I
Oh,
don't
okay.
drive, so I'm basically perfect in terms of a global crisis.
See, your conscience is completely clear.
Yeah.
It's not your fault.
But no, I think flying less. I think we have the internet now. We can talk via a web link, so there's less business travel. I think we've discussed this on a different pod for transport, uh, and also with being more responsible in terms of what we're doing in terms of transport. It benefits us also, not only for our environment but ourselves physically and mentally with
Yeah, absolutely.
exercise.
Things like cycling, yes, for sure, definitely.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is that perhaps because it's such a well publicized, well documented phenomenon now, this big crisis, that I feel like maybe governments and organizations are now trying to encourage people to live a more green lifestyle. So things like taxes and subsidies, perhaps maybe we'll be encouraged to buy an electric car for our next car, or maybe we'll be encouraged to holiday in the UK instead of flying abroad. So I feel like it's more part of the national conversation. People are much more aware of it. And I feel like governments are starting to take action a little bit more, which is a good sign, I think. So there is that.
Well, yeah, it's common practice for most households to have recyclable waste and
Absolutely,
to
yeah.
separate everything. So I think people are mindful of it. It's just it's taking the next step.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, something else that I find very interesting, and you hear this mentioned a lot, speaking of personal responsibility, is living a plant-based lifestyle. Because as we know, meat and animal products are actually supposedly quite bad for the environment because of the way that they are bred and the way they are farmed. And apparently it's very, very bad for the environment. So a lot of people argue that having a vegan or a plant-based lifestyle is much better for the environment and for the world. Is that something you've ever thought about, or
I've gone. I'm kind of like a part-time vegetarian.
part-time vegetarian? Okay.
So I won't have meat with every meal. It tends to be only at the weekends, but I usually have a salad, stir fry, and I'll be honest, James. It's back in the day when I was all about the meat. So I was like, oh, what, vegetarian? No, but I honestly don't miss it, and it doesn't really affect me that much not having
Yeah.
meat.
But how interesting that it's something you're much more aware of, maybe because it's in the news so often and become part of part of your awareness of the world, I imagine. Yeah, that's interesting. I think the big change that will happen is when technology improves to the point where uh, you can make meat out of plants. I know that sounds strange, but if you go to the supermarket now, you can see plant-based burgers and plant-based sausages. And I think the technology for creating all these new foods will definitely change people's behavior and might have a really positive impact on the environment. So that's quite positive, I think.
Yes, I agree, and I think if these plant-based meals or replace supplements are affordable, then I think most families would flock towards that in order just to save a bit of money.
That's
So
probably true. Yes, absolutely. So I think, Dan, overall, what we can say is that it's not all bad. Maybe it looks a little bit scary with climate change and global warming and all these things on the news. But actually, maybe if there are certain things we can do, and maybe certain things that governments and big organizations can do to encourage that kind of behavior, then we might be all right. Hopefully.
I think like you say, it's about creating awareness, and again, like I've gone kind of vegetarian, so that in a way has got to me, the awareness. So I can't see why future generations, if they're being brought up in this, that'll just be the norm for them, and it won't be so much of a big change.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Changing what's normal.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Ah, well, there we go. So, yes, global warming. There we go.
Yes, global warming, it does exist. We both
It does
agree.
exist. Yes.
And I think, especially from our conversation now, it's not all too bad.
I'm going to have live the rest of my day today now, Dan, feeling a lot more positive about the world. And I'll be making good choices about the environment throughout my
Yes,
day.
yeah. I think if we're all more mindful of what we're doing and our impact on our environments, then it's going to go in the right direction, I think.
Absolutely. Yes, I agree.
Find your English voice with IQ Global. Go to our website www.iqglobal.com to find out more.